What's up, line punchers? Today, something fun, just like every other day. Who doesn't love a little bit of fun? And today we're going to play with fire. And tool steel. So we're going to take brand new tool steel purchased off of Amazon and turn it into a usable tool like this. A punch or a scribe, whatever you want it to be. But the cool thing about this process is that it's equally transferable to making a stamp, making a punch, making a scribe, making a knife, or any other tool like a burnisher or something like that. And you're basically going to need just simple tools that you probably already have in your Metalsmith arsenal. So what we're going to do is head right over there and talk a little bit about steel. Because steel is a little bit different than the base metals and precious metals that we're used to working with, and how to harden it, how to work with it, demystify, simplify, and make this easy for you to make your own tool. And before we go, I'd like to remind you that if you feel so inclined, right down here there's a red subscribe button. Helps me out a lot if you click that and subscribe and then hit that little bell button. That little bell will let you know every time a Line Punch Forge posts a new video. What's up? Oh, I'm recording, it's okay. Never mind that. Happens all the time. If you are looking for your Line Punch Forge swag, you can find a new swag shop at LPFG swag.com. Get your t-shirts, your hats, your mugs, some cool stuff, all designed by me, and show your support. Also look out soon for the new Haymaker saw. I'm going to be using it back here on video here in a second, so you'll get to kind of see it in the works. I think that's about it. I will see you guys at the workbench and we'll talk about steel. What's up, everybody? Here we are back, and this fella is going to be the subject of our lessons today. A scribe or a punch. This one was made from this steel here, which is referred to as O1. O means that it's oil hardening. There are other steels that different designations and different things that they harden in, like water or air, but the rule for me is when in doubt, harden in oil, because hardening in air or hardening in water can oftentimes damage your steel, but oil is a much better option for those type of steels, especially if you don't know what type of steel it is. And the reason I say that is if you have an old tool, like an old file or an old punch, and it no longer serves its current purpose, you can repurpose it. But I get ahead of myself. That's for maybe a different video. Today we're talking about O1 steel, brand new, off Amazon, and how to turn this stuff, tool steel, into a usable tool. And we start that by heat treating. Now, this stuff bought off Amazon is what we would normally refer to as soft, or annealed, or normalized steel. So it cuts easily with a hacksaw, it cuts easily with a jeweler saw, you can cut it with files. It's easy to machine in this state, but as soon as you harden it, it becomes much, much harder than, say, your file or your punch or anything like that. So we're going to get into that, but first what we're going to do is talk about making a tool. So what I'm going to want to do is take a cutting of this and start turning that into what I want to use it for. So in this case, I'm going to make a punch, just like this guy. So I have about the approximate length of a punch I want. So I'm going to take that, I'm going to lay it out on my tool steel, and I'm going to make it a little bit longer than I want. And the reason for that is that I'm going to add this twisting in. And when that twisting is added in, it actually shortens the length of the overall tool. So I'm just going to measure right about there, and we're going to cut this off. Now, I could use this guy, could use this guy, or could use that. And they're all O1 steel, they all harden the same, but we're picking this. Mostly because when you twist it, it's got that cool kind of feature to it. Round steel, a little harder to get. So we're gonna do that, and I'll meet you over there. All right, I have my tool steel mounted in the vise here, and I'm about ready to cut it. And to do that, I'm gonna use my haymaker saw with a number 5 saw blade. And with a little bit of thread cutting oil on that, it should cut through just fine. So I'll go ahead and join you guys down here on the vise with the haymaker and cut this tool steel. Okay, we got a little bit of oil on there, and I'm just going to use my finger to start where I want my cut to go. Now that I have that established, I'm just going to start cutting. Alright, the next thing I'm going to want to do is take my cutoff of tool steel, and I'm going to want to round my end before I do anything with it, because I'm going to want it as a punch or a scribe. So what I'm going to do is try and center it in the chuck of my drill and spin it. And I'm going to spin it while I'm on the grinder. So that way it gets a nice concentric grind to it. And I also have a thing of water here. That water is going to aid in keeping the steel cool so it doesn't overheat. It is soft at this point, but I don't want to overheat it. I don't want it burning up. So I'm going to keep it nice and cool. I'm going to grind the shape that I want to grind on the end here, and then we'll do some bending, some fun stuff. To do this. Next thing I'm going to do is the top here. I'm just going to flatten it out, because I'm probably, if it's going to be a punch, I'm going to be striking there. If it's going to be a scribe, I'm just going to be holding it there, but I want to make sure this is uniform. I'm going to lower this down a little bit so I get less vibration. If you're filing and you get that kind of loud, nasty noise, it's probably because you've got too much vibration in your piece. It's sticking out too far. See how that went down? Okay. Now that that's finished up, I I went ahead and I sanded this part because I want to try and get all my sanding and finishing done before I heat treat, because then sanding is going to be a lot harder. So I have a nice uniform taper there, and I didn't take away too much from this tip because I want to try and keep as much here until it's hardened, because if I harden it or go to heat treat it and this is too thin, there's a potential that'll burn, and we don't want to burn or melt our metal during heat treating. So I leave this thick and then I grind it down either on a grinder or a sandpaper or something like that to kind of finish my tip on there. But right now I've got a nice finish on there, and I'm just gonna sand that out. Alright, for this part I'm going to want a open-end adjustable wrench, a crescent wrench, or whatever you want to call this thing. You'll need this or something equivalent. I like a nice long handle because it keeps my hand away from the heat, and before I start anything I want to make sure I adjust this to be exactly where I want it for bending. And I'm going to heat it up with just a standard jeweler's torch, like a silversmith, or oxyacetylene, or propane, or whatever. You can heat this up, and right now I try and push on it and I'm meeting some resistance. What you're going to see is if I heat it and position the wrench just over where I'm heating, eventually I'll start turning that like butter. And here we go. I'm just going to apply heat right where I want to make my bend. And I like it. So now I'm just going to let it cool by itself. I'm not going to quench it. I'm not going to do anything with it. I'm just going to let it cool on its own. And then what that's essentially going to do is what they refer to as anneal or normalize. Annealing is when annealing for steel is different than annealing for other metals. Annealing is heating it up and then letting it cool down at a controlled rate. What we're doing is normalizing. So we're going to heat up the metal and then allow it to return to room temperature by itself, normalizing the grain structure so that it doesn't crack or fracture or anything like that. So I'm just going to leave this here. When I'm ready, I'll come back, I'll clean it up, I'll do some hammer fixing on it probably to rebend it into shape, and then because I've got kind of a wonk going on with the twisting, and then we'll go from there. So we'll see you guys back soon. Alright, this is it pretty much cooled down. Still soft, I haven't hardened it yet. A lot of the time the swirls, the twists, will give an optical illusion for it being off. So right now that's pretty much it. But what I'm going to do now, just for fun, is I'm going to do some file work. So file work is something that sometimes they do in knives to add a little bit of distinction. So what I'm going to do here is, let me grab a marker. Alright, I have a marker, a triangle file, and a round file. And what I'm going to do is mark up this so that everything is all sharpied up. And I'm going to add some decorative file work. And I'm going to do that by doing some layout. This is just by eye. It doesn't need to be perfect. And once I establish those cuts, you'll kind of see what I'm doing. Alright, so I have 3 cuts. And I'm going to use my triangle file first, right along that cut line. So now I have 3 notches. Rotate again. Same thing, all 4 corners. Alright, now that I have those established, I'm going to take my round file and I'm going to angle one this way. All of this one is going to be angled that way. This one's going to be angled the same. And same thing with the top one. Alright, now comes the fun part. We have our tool, all the file work, all that fun stuff on it. Looking good. We're going to make it hard. We're going to take it from its soft state and make it hard. So what we're going to end up doing is pretty much only heating this section of the tool. We're going to be leaving this portion relatively soft because we want it to act as kind of a shock absorber. A lot of the time it's called the differential heat treat, where you have a softer side and a harder side. And what that ends up doing is lets you have a hard tool that is also somewhat flexible. So what we're going to do first is heat this up until we get a good orange color. And it's got to be an orange color all the way through. If there are any black spots in the steel, it means you're not quite to temperature yet. And that's going to cause there to be inconsistencies in the steel. Now, right now, the grain structure, the atomic grain structure of the steel is relatively large. What we want to do is heat it up so that everything relaxes and then quench it in oil. When we quench it in oil, all of that grain structure is going to go super tight and small. And then we're going to have a hard tool. The problem is that we're now probably too hard at that point. So we're going to what they refer to as temper it. And temper it, it can either be bake it in the oven for 400 degrees, or what we're going to talk about is tempering by color. Now, it's not an exact science and it does take some practice, but I'm going to demonstrate it so that you can give it a try on your own and see what you come up with. The cool thing about this is that if you screw up, heat it up, let it cool down all by itself, and you're able to start over. So not too shabby. So I'm going to grab some pliers, and I'm going to go ahead and heat this up until it's orange, and then we're going to go ahead and bloop, quench it in oil. Now, the oil that you use, important. Have ventilation in your shop, whatever you're doing if you're using oil. I like mineral oil and I like peanut oil because peanut oil smells like you're cooking peanuts. Mineral oil doesn't smell great, but it's still better than alternative of motor oil or other quenching oils. So I like mineral oil, I like peanut oil. Today I'm using mineral oil. So I'm going to go ahead and set up my camera so you can see the colors change in the steel, and then we'll go ahead and give it a quench. You'll see that all on camera, so join me there. So for safety, we have our fire extinguisher. I've got my oil here and a lid hooey-poo to place over the oil in case the oil gets too hot and flashes. So here we go. Keep it moving around. I like to bounce it up and down, move it in a circle, figure eights, anything smoky. Anything you can to kind of keep it moving around, keep it cooled. Now it's going to come out of the oil hot still. It's not going to be completely cool. So I like to try and keep it in the oil as long as I possibly can. Try and get it submerged. And then we have still hot, but very, very brittle at this point. So we'll go ahead and let this cool off until we can touch it, and then I'll show you how hard it is. Alright, here we are with our punch. This is it hardened. Now, this portion right here is going to be brittle like glass. So if I tap that on the concrete right now, it's going to shatter into probably 4 or 5 pieces. Now, to show that, the back part of the steel that I was filing on before, I'm going to go ahead and take a file on it. This part I didn't harden, remember? I didn't heat that up and I didn't quench that. So my file digs in. I can cut that. So that means later on I can polish that. But this section here that I hardened, my file skates right on it. It does not dig in. Nice and hard. That's how you can tell that the grain structure has gotten smaller and hardened. But we don't want it super hard. So what we're going to do is we're going to use color to determine when we quench this again. And we're going to heat this up until this portion right here is a straw yellow. Try and get this focused for you. So this portion here is going to be a straw yellow, and back here will be kind of a blue purple. So I'm going to take my torch and I'm going to heat right here. Whoop. I'm going to heat right there, and I'm going to watch the color transfer from here into the tip here. So let me grab my torch and we'll do that. I'm going to take my torch and I'm going to heat right here. Just a little bit. And then I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait to see what colors form, and I'm going to wait to see if this portion here gets the color formation of a straw color. I'm going to sit too, because this can take a little while. It's all about patience. And since I'm heating down here, the blue is going to show up here first, and that gives me an indication that the heat is now transferring this way. Now, one way you can tell this steel is hard is that it went from like a shiny to a gunmetal. And essentially what I'm trying to do is heat this metal up to about 400 degrees. 400 degrees is giving me that nice kind of straw color. So I see the color creeping from here, this way. There's some blues and purples right here. Okay, I see some light straw showing right there, which means that it's starting to get to about temperature. So as soon as that tip becomes a straw color, a nice rich straw color, I'm going to continue oil again. I don't know if you can see that on camera, but I'll show some pictures up close. I see color changing. I'm going to wait a minute for it to again. This should accelerate a little bit. So the bottom part of the round end is now kind of a straw color, light straw, but the tip is a very silvery kind of gray. It's not quite right. Tip is still too bright. And I'm just letting the heat transfer itself through the steel. Okay, I'm starting to get some good color from. I can't have it pretty fast.